Hi, I'm David. I'm a playwright from Ngunnawal country, the unceded lands of the Ngunnawal people in southeast Australia. I come from a family of climate scientists, and in 2014, I wrote a play entitled Kill Climate Deniers. So the story is ridiculous, but I wanted the play to start a conversation about what happens when the unstoppable force of climate change meets the immovable object of politics. So now there's this industry of pundits and journalists who make a living denying the reality of climate change. When I made the statement, "Kill climate deniers," I expected outrage from these people. But I did not expect pushback from the general public. I figured there are no real climate deniers. If there are regular, normal people who don't believe in climate science, they can't be that passionate. So I was very wrong.
Welcome to Climate Crossroads San Diego. I'm Walt, and what I would like to cover in this episode is the challenge of climate change denial. I've been wanting to cover this topic since I found this TED Talk video last year. The video on YouTube had copyright limitations until recently when the restrictions were relaxed. I'm sure that all of you have asked yourself the same question. Why isn't all the bad news about climate change we see in the media registering with the average Joe and Jane on the street? We all know the source of much of this indifference is confusion caused by a disinformation campaign.
Now, thanks to the work of journalists and scientists like Naomi Oreskes, we know how climate denial began. Oil and gas companies recognized the issue of greenhouse gas emissions back in the 1950s and 60s. They set out to cast doubt on the science. They funded lobby groups, marketing firms, politicians. They astroturfed an entire climate denial movement into being. So now there's this industry of pundits and journalists who make a living denying the reality of climate change.
However, the problem goes much deeper than that, as David Finnegan explains.
When I made the statement, "Kill climate deniers," I expected outrage from these people. But I did not expect pushback from the general public. I figured there are no real climate deniers. If there are regular, normal people who don't believe in climate science, they can't be that passionate. So I was very wrong. Now, to begin with, the play received exactly the attention I expected from exactly the people I expected. When the first production was announced in 2014, a Conservative politician in my hometown of Canberra called for the play to be shut down. There were angry articles in the Murdoch press, Breitbart, InfoWars, all the usual suspects in the right-wing media machine. As the play made its way into the world, something else started happening. I started hearing from climate deniers. Not fossil fuel pundits or right-wing journalists, real climate deniers. Regular, normal people. Now, I couldn't get my head around it. Why did they care so much? If you're an ExxonMobil executive, then you have a financial incentive to downplay climate science. But if you're a high school teacher in Queensland, or a massage therapist in Massachusetts, why would you spend your nights and weekends desperately trying to debunk Earth science research? Now, it turns out that although climate denial began as an astroturfed movement created by fossil fuel companies, it caught on because it connects with a certain group of people in a very real way. I got emails. I got physical letters. I got phone calls. They started showing up to performances of the play. And as the show got bigger and bigger, there were more and more of them. And they were passionate. Now, I wanted this play to start a conversation. And it did. It just was not the conversation I thought I was starting. I ended up speaking with hundreds of climate deniers over the course of this project. Now, some of them wanted to insult me and threaten me. Some of them wanted to tell me variations on the same gag. Like, what if I wrote a play called Kill Climate Scientists? But some of them were interesting. These deniers wanted to explain to me why climate science was wrong. They had a whole worldview. They said, the reality is, David, that climate change is a made-up excuse for a huge program of top-down intervention. What climate activists really want is to stifle our freedoms. They want to control what we eat, they want to choke the life out of rural communities, and they want to throw the doors open to massive global migration. Now, I wanted to respond to these people and say, I'm sorry, you're wrong, that's not what it's about. But the more I talked with them, the more I realized they're right. They are completely correct. I mean, they're not correct about climate change being a made-up excuse. That, sadly, is not true. But the consequences of climate change? Yes, diets are going to change. Yes, a lot of communities in exposed locations will be forced to leave. Yes, there will be huge movements of people within and between countries. They're right. And we don't even realize how right they are. I believe in the science of climate change, and so do probably most of the people in this room. But more often than not, we go about our lives as if it's not real. We plan our careers, we build houses, we educate our children as if the future will look like the past. But the world we're educating them for no longer exists. At 1 degree warming, we are already on a planet unlike anywhere humans have ever lived in the past, and our systems are starting to buckle under the strain. Now, whether you believe that we are sleepwalking into disaster, or if you think we're going to turn things around through high-tech solutions or massive social movements, whatever climate future you believe in, our lives are going to radically change. Our future will not look like our past. We accept the science, but we haven't processed the consequences. We don't explicitly deny climate change, but in our actions, we're like soft deniers, stealth deniers. So I'm one of these people. Maybe you are too. I keep my carbon footprint as low as possible, but then I got on a plane to give this talk. I read research reports about which cities will be vulnerable in future decades to climate shocks, resource shocks. And then I forget all that and think, I just want to buy a flat in my hometown. If you believe something, but you act like you don't believe it, do you really believe it? Now, climate deniers understand the consequences of the science, so they don't accept the science. They know what it means if it's true, so they won't allow it to be true. But I think we can learn from climate deniers. I want to be more like that high school teacher in Queensland, that massage therapist in Massachusetts, because they live what they believe. You and I, who think we know better, we're the ones in denial. And I know deep down that the longer we deny reality, the harder the shock when it hits. Thank you.
Why did I decide to put the spotlight on climate denial in this podcast? Because we will never achieve our climate goals unless we can reach the public at large. Otherwise, we are just a small group of environmentally concerned activists talking to ourselves in our own little media bubble. We really have no choice. We're losing the information war. When I talk to the average person about EVs, I hear about how the grid isn't ready, how unsafe they are, or Elon Musk. We won't decarbonize our homes and businesses unless there is a public consensus of the need for action. We need a high-profile, well-funded, prolific, and professional media campaign that turns climate change into a kitchen table topic. The message needs to move up the list of concerns right next to the economy, or the public will not be ready for the changes that need to be made, and they will resist. The question is, who will lead the charge in a climate change awareness media program? We can expect the next 4 years under Trump to undermine our message. So we need a force for counter-programming. The state of California and our municipal and county governments must lead at this critical moment. The grassroots environmental movement is too small and splintered into too many small groups to get the job done. Truly, California has a special role to play in the United States and the world at large. California has earned a reputation as a protector of the environment. California has taken some bold actions which other states and countries in the world have followed. Bringing a lawsuit against Big Oil for misleading the public about the threat of climate change is a good example. There's a story behind this that the public needs to understand. Recently, California moved up the list to be the fourth largest economy in the world. That gives our state government some clout. At a time that the Trump administration is about to sabotage itself with its crazy trade war, a bombshell announcement about how California will increase its efforts to fight climate change will demonstrate leadership. The message to doubters would be to declare a climate emergency to protect the future of California's citizens and businesses, especially after the wildfires in Southern California and while Trump is doubling down on climate change as a hoax. Probably at a minimum, we can expect hurricanes by late summer, which will make Trump look unprepared. Then there is the corruption part of the story.
Last month, Donald Trump summoned a who's who of top lobbyists and executives from the oil and gas industry to the upscale La Quinta/bribery palace he calls Mar-a-Lago, and proceeded to solicit $1 billion from the fossil fuel companies to get him elected, as multiple outlets have now reported. In exchange, the Washington Post reports, quote, he vowed to immediately reverse dozens of President Biden's environmental rules and policies and stop new ones from being enacted. The New York Times says, quote, Trump told the group that they should donate $1 billion to his presidential campaign because if elected, he would roll back environmental rules that he said hamper their industry. He told executives the amount of money they would save in taxes and legal expenses after he repealed regulations would more than cover a $1 billion contribution.
Thank you for watching, and keep up the good fight.